So this is a primarily film and TV based channel, but I don't wish to restrict myself from delving into other types of media. If I hear a song I like and want to talk about, if I read a good book, if I want to discuss animation or radio or theatre, then I'm going to share my praise. There was a hint of it in my End of the World video when I touched on the similarities between the show and comics, but this time I might be biting off a little more than I can chew. Because I want to talk about comics, and games, and movies, and TV shows. Essentially, I want to cover the broad world of Batman Spider-Man! Yup. When I was younger, I was obsessed with Spider-Man. I wore my Spidey outfit literally everywhere. If we were leaving the house, in my head, I had to dress up and fight crime. Recently, after dealing with some hardships, I received the absolute privilege of playing the new Spider-Man game on PS4. By the way, I stole my cousin's PS4 just so I could play the game. After looking back at the character of Spider-Man with my newfound analytical mind, I realized why he struck a chord with me so long ago and why it's a real tragedy that until only recently I stopped hearing that chord. I could make a whole video about just the video game and how much it does right, but first I must touch on why Spider-Man is just such a good character. Number 1, he's very relatable. This one is pretty straightforward. In his time, he was one of the only teenage superheroes, and considering his competition was filled to the brim with perfect beings, super gods, and billionaires, he seemed a lot more down to earth. He had normal issues. Stan Lee wrote him with the intent of sparking sympathy in the readers. He was nerdy, weak, had relationship issues, bully issues, money issues, insecurities, family issues. Peter Parker was the audience. If you were reading the comic, chances are you saw 80% of yourself in Peter. It's a lot harder to relate to an alien orphan who's had greatness bestowed on him from birth, who can solve pretty much all of the world's problems with a flick of his forehead curl. Number 2, he's fun. Also relatively straightforward, he's simply fun. He's a child, a kid. Of course he has that sense of responsibility and justice that I'll talk about in a second, but he recognizes that it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. The first thing all of you would do if you woke up tomorrow with superpowers is have some fun. You'd experiment, see what you can do, feel a sense of excitement like no other. The opening scene of Spider-Man PS4 is perfect at showing this. The music is Alive by the Warbly Jets. Warbly? Warbly? Can you think of a more fitting song? We're alive, we're Spider-Man, look at us go, zipping through buildings and going to fight crime. Contrast it with Batman's Arkham series. Don't get me wrong, they're great games, but the mood is vastly different. It's a more serious and brooding feel compared to that brightly lit New York we enjoy swinging through. And that's because what makes Batman Batman and what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man are nearly complete opposites. Number 3, his backstory. We all know it and we've seen it 10,000 times, so I'm willing to bet a lot of you are relatively sick of it. But please don't let that blind you from how perfect it is for his character. He's a child, he's immature. When he gets his powers, the very first thing he does is try to solve his own personal issues, like his bully problems and his financial worries. It's selfish and immature. Then Ben dies. His fault, yada yada, you know that part. With great power comes great responsibility. This changes the whole character. It forces Peter to grow up way too fast. He's a kid, he's having fun, it's what any of us would do if we got powers. And he's instantly punished with it with the tragic lesson that because he did not help those who couldn't help themselves, bad things happened, and it's his fault. So this shapes him into the earnest character we know and love. The character that puts on the mask every day, despite knowing that he's missing out on his teenage years and that will cause him to lose his girlfriend or his job or fail that exam. Every time he shoots that web, he sacrifices a part of his own life and causes himself more problems. Those problems that we ourselves face as readers. But he keeps doing it time and time again because he wants to make that difference. He doesn't want to see anything bad happen knowing he could have prevented it. It's something that I heavily identify with and have reminded myself to live by recently, and it's why we love Spidey. Number 4, his villains. His villains perfectly play off the morals and philosophies that the character of Spider-Man are built around. Everything in Peter's life goes wrong because he chooses to shoulder everyone else's burdens because he's the only one who can, due to his powers and his mental fortitude. This means the dynamic of having villains who are created by Peter's own failures is so damn good and interesting. Of course Peter would question his worth when Green Goblin / Spidey kills Gwen, or when Eddie becomes Venom, or when his best friend becomes a villain. They're all due to his own flaws and faults. He takes all of this abuse and sacrifice for no thanks, and he still screws up. He tries his absolute best and always does what he thinks is right. But when that results in a negative outcome, as it so often does, who wouldn't wonder if they chose the right choice? Even Jameson reflects this perfectly. He isn't even a villain, but he's the metaphor for everyone in Peter's life who thinks he's simply a lazy and immature kid. Yet Spider-Man still does all that he does thanklessly. His morals are attacked nearly every time he fails, and it leads to an excellently dynamic character, who's made even more endearing by the fact he still puts on the mask and still tries to make that difference, and makes it even more sympathetic in those few moments when he can't and just falls apart. So those are just some of the reasons why Spider-Man is dope. And that's the end of part 1, because I need sanity and sleep. I lied, sleep is for weaklings, but you get my point. In part 2, I'll discuss why some of the Spider-Man movies missed these points, and why this game nailed it perfectly. Anyway, tune in next time. I'm gonna swing around doing absolutely nothing for like 20 minutes, because I already 100%ed the game, but it's just that fun. When Green Goblin kills Gwen, or when Eddie becomes Venom, or the that goddamn that was a perfect first take. The notification.